Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great, Eric. How about you? Happy March.
Happy March. We are into March. We are wrapping up the first quarter already. There's just 1 month left to go. It's amazing how quickly the year is going, and finally the snow up in the Northeast is starting to melt.
Absolutely. We got one cold day tomorrow, and then I bet you this stuff is going to be gone by early next week. And it was a month ago today that we were enjoying that 12 to 18-inch snowstorm on February 1st after a snow was
Exactly. We had 1 month of a lot of snow, and hopefully we're heading into spring now, and I, for one, am looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So today we have a guest, Michael Desroches, who is somebody who I met through the Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce on a Zoom presentation that I did on networking. And Michael's into branding and things like that, but he has a dual approach in that he has worked with large corporations and so on and so forth, but he has a big soft spot and has actually started a business to handle nonprofits, and he's looking to do a whole lot more. So welcome to the show, Michael. Tell us about yourself and how you got to where you're at right now.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, Michael Desroches. I spent about 25 years in corporate marketing, as a brand guy, creative guy, designer by trade. Did my corporate stint for a while. And then about 6 years ago, I left corporate and started my own firm called Brand Inspiration. We're a boutique marketing communications firm down in Woodbridge, Connecticut. And, the business has evolved since we started doing anything for profits or any company that would give us, work. We started doing more focus on nonprofits. And then we started developing our portfolio across the country in terms of, working with nonprofits on small to mid-sized nonprofits on, holistic marketing communications. I have a business partner that owns a fundraising consulting firm that we come in and we talk about this blended communication and fundraising perspective. Whereas, in general terms, a lot of nonprofits have development in one silo and communications in other. It's no different than for-profit sometimes when sales and marketing are kind of separated. And we talk about how marketing, communications, and fundraising need to be blended to have the best approach for donors in your constituency and grants and stuff like that, foundations and stuff. So, so that's what we do. And, by day I'm I run in a marketing agency, and by night I'm an inspiring author. I actually have a children's book that we just launched this weekend, and it's going to be published in the next month here. So.
Is that Advancing Young Minds, the one that you told me about when we talked?
Yeah, so the nonprofit that we want to launch eventually is Advancing Young Minds. The children's book, I've been working on a novel for a couple of years called Gracefully Stumbling Onward, and what we did is we created a new publishing company under that name, and I decided to write a children's series of books. We have the first one that just was marketed this week called There's a Moth in Daddy's Coffee. And we're gonna hopefully follow it up with I have a 7-year-old son, and he wants us to follow it up with There's an Ant in Daddy's Water. So we'll see how it goes, but it's actually in publishing stage right now, and it'll be out. We're doing pre-order sales on it currently. Yep.
And we're at a restaurant with all the new food items that you have there. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's right. All the new food items, and it's we're trying to do it really primarily it fits into my whole feel of nonprofits and what we do in my business side, but we're going to take the profits from the book and we're going to buy books for small nonprofits and boys and girls clubs or small elementary schools, and we're going to give them books for kids to take home, because we feel that there's not enough literacy at the home level with a lot of urban areas and stuff. So we're going to hope to do it. We got to sell some books to do it first, though. So
very nice. So yeah, I'm very interested in what you're doing with nonprofits. As our listeners may or may not know, I'm on the board of directors of the Connecticut Humane Society, and we actually merged our development and marketing teams several years ago. So I do appreciate what you're doing, having gone through it. Tell us a little bit about what the advantage is to having these under one umbrella and actually having, removing barriers to communication between them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the biggest advantage from my seat. So when I look at what nonprofits do, no matter what the size of the nonprofit is, right? They don't sell a widget, right? They don't have a tangible product generally that they're like selling a widget like B2B or B2C has. So, all you have is mission, vision, what you're trying to accomplish for the community and or your donors or any of your constituents. And so, from our side, all good development starts with a great case for support, right? The answer to question why someone in the community and or a donor or a major gift donor or a foundation should care enough to give you funding, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, you could be, putting in wells, you can be fighting cancer, you could be doing a million different things a nonprofit may do, and there's lots of them, of course, as you know. But at the end of the day, you have to start with the case for support, and to get to a great case for support, you need the idea of being able to tell your story in an eloquent way across multiple channels all the time, and it always has to tie back to the case for support. Is we start with the case, and that's really a lot to do with the fundraising development mind of my partner John Canine. But then my team comes in and says, okay, listen, after we talk to stakeholders, after we do focus groups, after we start to think about why donors give you money currently, or why how much benefit you provide through the services your nonprofit provides to the community, then how do you tell that story? So we feel that, and we see it all the time, that the first thing that happens is that even the executive directors of the nonprofit or the board members of the nonprofit, they think they have a definite idea of why they matter, the nonprofit matters. But generally speaking, after the focus groups and after asking a lot of questions, the donors have a different position, or the volunteers, or why it matters to them. And so that first part literally can change the entire brand experience of a nonprofit to their outbound market, and the way people, and maybe even changes the services they provide based on feedback. And then it's just about the case for support. It's about marketing channel execution. So, I think it's a big deal to blend the two. No different than in for-profits with sales and marketing being combined at the hip.
Yeah, I think most people don't really think about how nonprofits really are businesses. They need to operate as a business. The difference is, they're running on donations rather than product sales. But right. The way they operate, it's very much like a business, except ultimately a nonprofit's big goal is to put itself out of business and solve the problem.
Right. Right. It is need to be run like a business. And a lot of them, I mean, so many nonprofits that I run into, and folks that are on boards like yourself or lead boards, like, and, they all get that. Like the executive directors are very savvy. Their communication channels discipline has been very savvy. I mean, you see most nonprofits have pretty good pulse on their social media channels and or what they're putting out, maybe if they're doing a podcast or what they're putting out in white papers or blogs but sometimes, and I see this all the time, is that they forget about how important the case is, right? The actual why they matter. And it gets kind of distilled down over the years, right? Volunteers might say certain things about the nonprofit versus board members versus, their social media manager or whatever. But at the end of the day, the more disciplined, the executive director can be with his or her team and the board, it will prove results, because that's what good for-profits do, right? They're very disciplined with brand communications, and that term, in nonprofits doesn't get used a lot. Brand experience, brand narrative, stuff like that. What we try to convince them of is that you're a brand just like anyone else. I mean, now you're not selling a product per se, but the experience the community, a volunteer, a donor, a board member has with your organization is just as important, and probably more important, because you are dependent on revenue from donors.
Yeah, I imagine. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say that's so important to remember, is that nonprofits live and die by the support of their donors, and they have to get that message across to them, even more so than a for-profit. A for-profit, somebody can pick up a product or use a service on a whim and go, oh, this is pretty good. But for a nonprofit, it's all about the mission and getting that message out to the donors.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it's been quite the past year for you since COVID hit, as far as, obviously logistics, as far as handling the nonprofits, kind of coaching them through things, reinventing new ways to raise money because all the events are going away and that kind of stuff. Tell us about how 2020 into 2021 has been for you so far, as your focus, and what new outside the box things you're doing with your clients, and how are they hanging in there?
Yeah, they're hanging in pretty good. I mean, we have had to, candidly change some things. Every business consultant agency has had to think about, putting COVID clauses in contracts or, especially for some of the larger mid-sized nonprofits where we had to really look at what they were doing come April on, right? So we knew that obviously in the fall, they'd be starting annual appeals, their end of a year appeal programs. We also knew that, like, one of our clients in Chicago does a national walk that literally was supposed to be in May, right when when everything was shut down, and they do 50 sites across the country, and we had to totally rethink that with them. They decided to, do it entirely virtually and that was a big thing, right? Do it virtually on an app. They had a company do an app. We didn't do it. They had a company do an app where, they were able to still mimic what the walk would, the community part of the walk was hard to replicate, but they were able to do it a lot. But, obviously donations on the walk and having all those different communities across the country on one day and 50 sites was lesser in terms of the impact of funding, but they were able to get through it. Their annual appeal was pretty successfully because, their community really needs the support and understands how well they do. But then you have other clients where they had to change their whole way of doing business. We have one of our clients that was doing an event in the fall for the elderly community, and normally they would be going to senior centers, and they would have people on site telling them about Medicare and stuff like that, but that couldn't happen, right? So we had to reinvent, how do we reach these same people, the kids of these elderly people, and explain that they have all these Medicare options and stuff. So we created a whole program around Facebook. I mean, it was all based on Facebook ads, Facebook events, Facebook Zoom, setting up Zooms on Facebook for the sons and daughters of these elderly parents, or even the elderly that are on Facebook. There's a lot of them on Facebook. And it was super successful to a point that they actually, renewed their faith in us, for sure. But, we had to be creative, even with Zoom. That's a perfect example, Chip. I mean, even the technology used. I mean, before we would be taking our video team to go shoot video everywhere, right? You want to interview a volunteer or interview a stakeholder in a nonprofit. We would have to go there, put up the lights, put up the camera, the whole thing, right? Our writer would interview them. Well, we took that all out of mix this last year. We do all of our interviews were for clients and any of their stakeholders on Zoom. And then, the production value is so akin to everybody accepts that Zoom video is fine for social media and media, that we just edit them all together. So it's changed kind of our business in terms of we've become very heavy in the digital side. I mean, between social and digital graphics and digital video and all that, and Zoom, setting up Zooms and doing all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really changed it. And going into 2021, I don't see it changing back so quick. I think the pivot of all of us consultants, and your world, my world, I think that being able to pivot and be flexible and seeing our clients accomplish what they need to accomplish, even with the challenges of COVID and the challenges of technology sometimes, is here to stay a little bit. I think we're all going to learn lessons from it, and that's not to say that don't one-on-one donor visits won't be in person, or you won't go back out and interview an event, or events won't happen in person. They will. We all know that. But I think there's going to be some stuff that just kind of stick. Like Zoom is fine for a lot of meetings. Zoom is fine for podcasts, right? So, or any other kind of platform is fine for podcasts. So, it's just I think things have definitely drastically changed and probably just escalated from taking a couple more years to get to this point, and then COVID kind of brought it forward a little faster.
Yeah, you're definitely right about things moving forward. I do know a lot of organizations that even when everything goes back to a semblance of normal and they can meet in person, some of the things that they created to get through this period are going to stay. I know a lot of nonprofits did a virtual gala because they couldn't have an in-person gala. And a lot of them have decided, you know what? The virtual silent auction worked fantastic. So we're going to keep
Sure.
that even though we have a live gala event. And so I think what we're going to see going forward is actually a hybrid of what came before and what we created to get through COVID.
Agreed. Totally agree with that. Yeah, we have I sit on the board like you. I sit on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Waterbury, and we're doing Thursday night. This Thursday is their. It used to be their gala, right? Live. I mean, big event, food, beverages, the whole thing. And now this year we're doing a online auction Thursday night.
Yeah,
And the registrations are pretty good.
Yeah, and obviously talking about the way things are changing, obviously no matter what you're doing, I'm sure for many nonprofits, their revenues are way down. However, because we are now in the Zoom age where there are no travel logistics and you can do things anytime and whatever, we have built-in cost saving just by doing things this new way because they're so easy to do. And so I think that's one big benefit. As Eric said, which I'm sure is the way it's going to be, is there is going to be a hybrid moving forward because a lot of people out there, even though things are getting better, are going to be a little bit leery about going out again. And other people are going to be lazy and not want to go out because they're lazy, but you're still going to have people that want to go, the physical events and stuff like that too. So it's going to be a mixture. And as you said, I mean, what this has done is forced us all to realize what we've had at our fingertips for the last few years, but really haven't used until now.
Agreed. I totally agree with that. And I think it will, couldn't agree with you guys more in terms of the hybrid. I think there'll be a blend like in anything else. And, I guess we'll just see where it goes. And, in terms of donors and, I think that people are still donating, right, to their nonprofits that feel important to them. But I also think, that people are taking a kind of a self-awareness check of what is important to them, right? There's some of the nonprofits they may have given to in the past not as important to them as it was before. It's still an important nonprofit. They still do great things probably for their community or for their constituents, but you trying to take a personal assessment. I think that a lot of individuals that have been with their families for a long time now, working from home, or kids remote learning and everything else like that. I think that they are just are taking stock of what's important to them and what's not in terms of where they're going to put their philanthropic dollars. And I think that's something that nonprofits are going to have to be keenly aware of, because I don't think they could take any donors, and not that they do, but some nonprofits may take a donor for granted, and you just have to probably be pretty careful of that. And that's probably even more important, to be consistent with your message and why you matter.
So over the course of 2020, with both your for-profit clients and nonprofits, obviously you saw a lot of pivots going on. Can you talk about some of the lessons learned over the past year and the changes that went forward?
Yeah, I mean, lessons for a small boutique agency like mine for sure are, well, if we did ever take a client for granted, don't do that again. Right. So, I definitely learned that lesson, once over this year. Do a better, I think for us, we really spent a lot of time, my team and I, with our clients, just asking them a lot of questions like, okay, this is what we were doing for you before the world kind of shifted and ended in March. Right. So how can we help you get through? I think all consultants should be asking their clients now, even going into the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID, how can we help you differently? How does it affect if you're a for-profit, how do we provide value or services that allow you to, if you're a for-profit, sell more products or services, or, have better consumer relationships and retention programs with your customers. And on the nonprofit side, how can we help you about your programs and services in a better way to folks that might have been tone deaf and not heard the messaging about your nonprofit, and or have not turned the corner and become a donor, or don't know exactly all the value you bring when that donor dollar comes into that individual that may need your support, or community that may need your support. So I think us asking questions is more heavily on my plate than it was before. I think that I've been leading my team in that way. And then just being, one of the biggest things, to be honest with you, fiscally, is to, and I've talked to a lot of other consultants, is you just have to adapt. Meaning, if you're in business like we all are, to do services for a client, no matter if they're a for-profit or nonprofit, you have to eliminate this barrier of the barrier of getting on board with them, right? So we just took on a client up in Maine, and and we their steering committee didn't really want to put the money into marketing, but they didn't want to go more than a 3-month contract. And and I was like, that's fine. I told my team, I was like, that's fine. Let's give them great value for 3 months, and then we can renew with them, at the same rate. And then after that, we can have another conversation. So, I talked to some consultants that were really hurting or lost a good amount of business. I said, one of the things that worked for me, and it might not work for everybody, is just to be flexible. We don't have to lock ourselves into, as consultants, like, well, I have to get this retainer or fee to do the exact same work I was doing before COVID. I think that everybody in business, to be successful, has to be flexible and pivot, like the word we used before. That's definitely some of the lessons I learned.
Absolutely. I mean, the ability to change is so important, the ability to adapt. And we've talked about this on this podcast before, how people talk about the new normal. But quite frankly, the new normal is adapting to situations, and so was the old normal. We always had to keep adapting to change the changing world. Now it's just changing a little faster.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
No, your approach is wonderful, talking about pivoting and adapting and so on and so forth, because obviously working with nonprofits, what they do comes from the heart of the people who are running the organizations and from the volunteers. And really, when we talk about working on yourself and what you're doing professionally and so on and so forth, what you're doing professionally has to come from the heart and really be a part of what your passion and purpose is. And, for those of you out there who have not worked on and tried to find what your passion and purpose is, it's something that you got to do, because the bottom line is you can go out there and kill it financially, but if you're not happy doing what you're doing and you don't feel like you're making a difference, it's not going to work out. So obviously realizing that is a fantastic way to actually justify your pivoting and adapting and so on and so forth, because we all need to get paid for doing what we're doing, but what you were doing for your clients and helping them do for themselves is so much more important. And that's what it's all about.
I couldn't agree more. Like I literally firmly believe that the work you do matters so much. And, no matter what your occupation is, if you find passion in it and then you actually find results in it for your clients, if you're a consultant or whatever, and you find that's, at the end of the day, that's the best feeling, right? When a client tells you that their annual appeal raised more money, or, that they were able to provide services that they weren't able to provide before, directly because, marketing communications or fundraising development help the client raise more money. That's what it is. And that's, for me, that's what it is. I love working for profits as well, but it's just different. It's not better or worse. It's just uniquely different in terms of mission, vision of a nonprofit. And to be quite honest with you, I'm a storyteller. I love words. I adore reading and long series and Netflix and all that stuff. I just love storytelling. So I think that, in the nonprofit space, you just have less restrictions in terms of being able to tell a story in a unique way.
Well, I think it goes even further than that. It's not just, fewer restrictions. When you're at a nonprofit, that story is how you're getting your message across. At CHS, we always talk about the stories of this, puppy came to us injured because such and such happened, and these are the services we provided to get that puppy back up on its feet, and the family that adopted him, and a year later, they come back to visit. It's all about that story. And most nonprofits have those stories, and it's so important for them to get them out. I think this is one of those cases where for-profits need to learn from the nonprofits and learn what their stories are and tell them the same way nonprofits do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Eric. I mean, I really think that I think that sometimes for-profits get stuck in, does everything connect back to the brand, or is this our brand mission, or or they don't tell enough stories about their people, right? The people that work in the front lines of branding at most for-profits, right? Customer service, sales, folks that work in production or whatever the case. Nonprofits do such a great job of telling the stories of the people that help support the mission, and I think that's something that sometimes gets lost in the for-profit side of things.
All right, we're coming up on the end of our time. So, Chip, do you have anything else you want to bring up?
Well, I mean, I love the approach, and again, talking about nonprofits and even about people in business. What you're really doing, helping these people out, is they have their passion for doing what they're doing, and by your guiding them and helping them raise their money and plan their events and so on and so forth, you're actually helping them go home every day with a smile on their face, knowing that they've accomplished something that is well beyond themselves. And that's really what life's about. So it's been a pleasure having you on today.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed the time for sure.
And Michael, if somebody wants to get a hold of you to use your services, how can they do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to email me, Michael, Michael, at brandinspirationonline.com. So Michael at brandinspirationonline.com.
Fantastic. And Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for this week?
The big takeaway is just keep on adapting and just keep on looking within to make things happen properly. It's just onward and upward. Keep giving back.
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is that we're always adapting to change. You have to keep those adaptations, stop looking backwards at, let's go back to what we used to do. Pick the best of the adaptations that you've been able to make and move forward with them. Whether that's using technology or telling a story, those adaptations are what progresses your business or nonprofit into the next quarter, the next year, and the next decade. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts, along with the rest of the XVadio podcast network. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.